Chapter 12. Why couldn't I have done more? It's the only regret Gareth has over her life as a knight. She wondered, had she trained for longer, fought and learned harder, would she have saved Camelot from falling apart? Would she be able to prevent Sir Lancelot from losing himself? Sometimes, she dreamt of such scenarios, of worlds where she is known as a brave knight of the Round Table, and the kingdom she served known throughout the entire world. But alas, the dream soon ends, and she'll wake, forever reaching for that impossible dream. Will she wish to change all that? No, she won't. Her kingdom may be mere history, but its legacy remains. Britain stands today, tall and with pride, and no doubt her king and the other knights would be pleased to see it. Honestly, it's too bad there is a war she must compete in at the moment. She so wants to go visit her motherland, but doing so now is impossible. And she isn't going to complain, because she's a big girl now. That aside, this Holy Grail war is interesting. The Grail had supplied her with foreknowledge on the world before her summoning, and she was fairly sure the servant was the one to fight other servants, while the masters are the ones commanding them. Which was why she was so outright shocked to see her master and her male companion spar with speeds and power that rivaled or even surpassed most servants. Sir Shiro is fast, incredibly so, and she had a hard time trying to catch his blurring image as he sped around the empty field. His constant forward momentum reminded her of Sir Lancelot, and she couldn't help but imagine what would happen if the two met. Hanami, her own master, did not lose against him. The speed and strength she lacked, she made up with her immense magical prowess, casting spells and altering the landscape with hardly any trouble. If Sir Shiro reminded her of Sir Lancelot, then her master resembled Merlin with his incredible magical strength and cheery personality. She hasn't quite seen if she also has his pranking tendencies, but she dearly hopes her master isn't a prankster. Actually, she's somewhat convinced that the two aren't humans. Sir Shiro's injuries heal far faster than possible, and her master's magecraft is far too powerful for a spell cast in an age far past the age of gods. Gareth doesn't know why, or how, or the way this war will go on. But one thing is for sure. This will surely be quite the bizarre adventure. So they don't have these either. Waver frowns, looking at the slip of paper in his hands, giving a cross over an item Caster had asked him to get. They aren't all that rare, but all the stores were oddly empty of the items he wanted. He'd only managed to get some herbs and roots to use for healing potions. He sighs. He'd gotten into his flow too. Lamenting his loss of progress, he continues onward, looking for any other stores he can possibly buy the needed items from. Then he feels it, and all his hairs immediately stand on its end. A servant. It seems like it. Should we see who they are? Then Caster's voice suddenly sounds from behind him, and it's only barely that he manages to stop himself from falling over. When did you dash? And no, never mind. It isn't time to be freaking out over this. A servant had sent a signal, and it's now his choice to see who it is. It's a heavy dilemma. Stay too passive and get eaten, or go aggressive and jump into the fire. He let the turmoil bounce in his head, slowly assessing the possible scenarios, but then he remembered something he read from that book. Do not try and reason with servants. Their existence is above our reality. Let's go. He sees Caster's astral form nod, and the two make their way towards the signal, splitting from the crowd and beginning to enter a forest at the far west. Sounds fade, a sign that they just entered a bounded field, and Caster immediately materialized, drawing out a wooden bow from thin air. Just in time to block a large cannonball, the force sending her back and away from Waver. Caster. But there isn't any time for him to follow her as he quickly jumps back. The ground he stood on before exploded, and out from the dust comes a girl. She's beautiful, incredibly so, with her glistening gray hair and her red eyes, but he sees the fanged teeth she has, and the stains of blood all around her dress, and he realizes. She's a dead apostle. Oh. What's a young boy doing here? Her red eyes flash, and she forms a cruel smirk. Oh well. And then she rushes forward, mouth open. She was far too fast for him to follow, too fast to react, so Waver can only wince as he feels her teeth sink into his neck, drawing blood and quickly beginning to drain the liquid that gives him life. He grits his teeth, staring at the manic amusement dancing in her eyes. Suddenly, pain flashes through the dead apostle's body, and she jumps back to see a small green dagger stabbed into her abdomen. Oh, so the little boy can fight BA-. Then she suddenly falls, and it's to her horror to see her pale white skin beginning to turn black, like a plague is slowly eating her body away. What is this? But no matter what she does, no matter how much prana she tries to force into the wound, it isn't closing, and the taint isn't slowing down. Of course I can fight back. It would be kind of embarrassing if I can't. She quickly snaps to the boy, growling as she sees him drink a vial of red liquid. He throws away the empty vial, and with rubbing his neck, he stares at her. Never underestimate an opponent, he says, smiling as steam begins to rise out from between his fingers. Casually, he removes his hand and stretches it out, the bite mark no longer there. What the fuck? Understandably, the dead apostle is shocked. Before she became a dead apostle, she was a magus, and she knows of the potions alchemy can make. But never had she seen a potion that can heal a wound so quickly and cleanly. Who are you? Waver Velvet. 2 more daggers are thrown, and she can only dodge one and let the other one stab into her left shoulder. Immediately, the same taint begins to spread, and strength leaves her left arm, letting it dangle uselessly at the side. She growls, pulling out the knife she recently receives and throws it back at the offending human. Only for it to shatter in the air, leaving only motes of light. Any further thoughts are interrupted as a glass of white liquid smashes onto her face. The liquid hardens, blocking her sight. No longer caring for her appearance, she tears off the white solid with bestial ferocity and bends forward. Gram! Just in time to receive a ball of blazing fire to the face, which is further powered up by the sudden splash of oil on her body. Jaya! An inhumane scream leaves her throat, loud enough to send shockwaves out through the forest, knocking Waver back slightly. But that was enough for her, and she quickly leaps forward, her nails extending to unsightly claws, and she makes a deep gash right on the boy's chest. He flinches from the sudden pain, before he pulls out a vial of red liquid, the same one he drank earlier, and flushes it down her throat. She blinks, confused, but she smirks and stabs her claws through his chest, delighted at the expression of pain he gains. So, how does it feel? Hurts so much you used a wrong potion, That's why dash. That's why you're so pathetic. Her eyes pop open, suddenly realizing that the voice that finished her words isn't hers, and to her horror, she realizes that her speech is missing. Waver raises his feet, visible circuits of prana glowing on the limb, and he kicks her, hitting the hilt of the knife and driving it further into her stomach. My potion heals the living, giving them life. You're a corpse living on past its time. He smiles. Then what would happen if you drink my healing potion? Scalding heat burns in her lungs, but she can't scream, the throat he'd poured the potion in turning black. Cancer cells live on because they're faulty, and when they are healed, they die. He levels a stare at her. Your body is an organism living past its prime. You cannot heal, only regenerate. Isn't that right? Any remark she has goes silent. All she can do is hold on, gripping tightly to the remnants of life she has as the potion reaches down into her bloodstream. Patches of black are appearing all over her body now, mixing together with the others. How had this gone so wrong? She is a dead apostle, a superior being to humans. She had many grand ideas, so many things she wanted to do. And the Grail had chosen her as a master. Fate must truly be on her side, wasn't it? Is this her punishment for tampering with life? Is this the work of fate? Pitting her against this elusive magus to defeat her. Damn it. And so she closes her eyes, and the rest of her body crumbles down, turning into black chunks of rock, crumbling away and returning to the earth it once came from. Waver sighs, popping open another potion of healing and taking a drink. Just like before, the stabs and scratches her received closes, steam rising out as the wound disappears. But it doesn't remove the pain, and he barely stopped himself from screaming as the stab through his heart closes. He stares at the ground the dead apostle once stood, before giving a shaky breath and backing up onto a nearby tree. That was, both the most awesome and terrifying thing he'd ever gone through. He never thought he'd be able to defeat another master, let alone a dead apostle. Then again, she isn't as strong as the clock tower says, which means that she's a particularly new dead apostle, but still. A dead apostle. And he killed it. Had he been the Waver from a couple months ago, he surely would have died instantly. He isn't a spectacular magus, and being the first from his family, he doesn't have much backing to further his research. Which is why he only holds appreciation for Castor, the woman who'd accepted him as her disciple. Sure, she trains him more on alchemy and battle than actual magecraft, but the effects show. Now, to find Castor. Not bad. Castor sighs, lowering the bow and taking a look at the attacker, a boisterous woman with a scar across her face. She wears an excited grin, made menacing by the pair of pistols held in her hands. Castor does not react. A silent type, huh? The woman frowns, before shrugging. I don't mind that. The two pistols fire, but the bullets are swiftly intercepted by a blast of light pellets. Ryder swiftly turns and leaps away, barely in time to avoid the sudden pillar of light crashing down. Pellets of light begin to shred out, firing away in all directions, some of which Ryder shoots down. Most are missing. Ryder raises an eyebrow, wondering if this opponent of hers has impaired eyesight, but she looks at the scattering light pellets again, and it's to her surprise. Yeah, surprise, that the pellets are forming a pattern. Forgive me. From where I'm from, introductions are done after the bout, but this isn't that place anymore. The pillar of light fades, revealing Castor, floating high above. Servant Castor. As it is unlikely for you to be assassin, I assume you're Ryder. She says, but something about that seems off. Yep. Francis Drake at your service. Isn't revealing your true name ill-advised? Ryder scoffs at that, looking towards the forest where Waver and Ryder's master seemingly are. Honestly, I just want this war to end. My master's boring as hell, and she's a psycho. The pirate sighs. And she's not even using her command seals. It's kinda sad really. I agree. Castor curtly says, and Ryder grins. Not much of a talker, are you? She says, and Castor shrugs. I find talking in battle rather tiring. Well, light shimmers behind Ryder, and the air seems to tremble. Castor forms an arrow and notches it, aiming it at her. Ryder smirks. Let's continue. Golden Hind. A large red ship forms from the light, its cannon bared and ready to fire. Ryder fires her pistols, the cannons of her ship following in tow, and Castor fires her arrow, charged and shimmering with rainbow light. The two forces clash with a bright flare, but the firing continues. Ryder maintains her cannon fire, while Castor begins to move, flying around as she fires back at the noble phantasm. But as expected of one, the ship doesn't fall easily, and it takes several powerful shots to finally see some of the wood tear off. Had this battle occurred at night, then this bout would have been much easier for her. Sprout. At Castor's command, sprouts of bamboo burst out from the earth, stabbing into the bottom of the ship and destroying one of its cannons. Not ordinary bamboo then, Ryder concludes, seeing the splinters of wood laying on the deck. With one of the Golden Hind's cannons destroyed, and part of it stuck because of the bamboo, Ryder's firepower decreased, and the ship's mobility is cut short. She could dispel the ship and resummon it again, but that'd leave her open to attacks, especially seeing how fast those bamboo sprouts grew out from the ground. Oh well, she's dragged this out enough. Ryder grins. Now. Let the hunt begin. The words reverberate through the air, a physical manifestation of the power behind her words as the grass around them begins to violently sway. Ripples scatter across the area, and chunks of dirt and stone are ripped from their place, carried away by an unseen monsoon. Waver is in there. Castor narrows her eyes, before moving right in front of the path towards the forest she'd been shot out of. She disposes of her wooden bow, letting it fade back into the world, and presses a hand down on the fertile soil below. The gates to the Imperial Sanctuary. Cast away those unworthy. Fire. Golden Wild Hunt. An army of 100 ships, each armed with their own cannons, appear out from the ripping air. Their cannons prime, and with power bolstered by their history, the cannons fire out beams of concentrated fire, following the fire of her ship's cannons. The hail of massive laser fire quickly reaches Castor, but she does not move away. She reaches out into the earth, invoking a mystery long past, and shouts. Bamboo Forest of the Lost. Sprouts of bamboo grow out, jutting into the sky with astounding speed. But as before only tens had appeared, this instance far surpasses the thousands, creating an interlocking layer of enchanted bamboo. The cannon fire meets the bamboo, and the world is blown away as the two forces begin to compete. Slowly, under the combined heat, the bamboo begins to burn and snap away, one by one, and soon stack by stack. Soon, a third of all the bamboo had already burnt down, and more is following. The air grows thick with the heat, and the grass under Castor shrivels and burns from the combined heat. Another third burns down, and the combined cannon fire has now become visible to Castor, and she gains an understanding of why the forest of bamboo burnt away so quickly despite its many enchantments. But alas, the heat flows away, and the cannon fire finally fades, with the burnt grass around Castor being its only indication of ever happening. Damn, I lost hard, huh? But that wasn't the full extent of her powers, Castor deduces, looking at the slowly fading legs of Ryder. Had your master not died that last second, you would have broken through. Castor says in consolation, but Ryder merely scoffs. Bah. You probably have more things up your sleeve, don't ya? To that Castor says nothing, but the answer is clear, and Ryder sighs. Ma, even without being held back, I don't think I would have beaten you. Well, this sucks. Ryder says, laughing, and Castor forces down the slight chuckle building in her throat, instead giving a small wry smile at the scarred woman's little conundrum. Then do you want to have another chance, Ryder? All eyes are immediately drawn to the new voice in the scene. It's a young girl, roughly around Waver's age. She doesn't look too out of place, but as she'd come to know, outward appearances are very misleading, and she can clearly feel the immense pool of prana the girl has inside her, one big enough to compete even against servants. Well, who are you? Ryder says, still sounding pretty annoyed from the entire experience. The girl smiles wryly. What I said. Want to continue in the war. Girl. You're a master, right? She nods. And you've got a servant already, right? Another nod. Ryder sighs. You want to kill yourself by having me? The girl smiles again. Meh, don't worry about it, Ryder. My prana's large enough to host you too. She's telling the truth, Ryder. Castor finally says. The girl's prana is far above a normal mage. I don't think she'll suffer any consequences by having you as well. The girl gives a bright smile and a thumbs up at her support, and she's reminded of her a certain witch from the past. Huh. Ryder looks to the girl, an eyebrow raised in suspicion. And the catch? None. She says, before growing silent. Well, I guess just be ready, since some of the servants we're going to face is pretty crazy. But Ryder isn't convinced, and she retains her stare at the girl. Slowly, the girl's smile slips away to a much more serious look. She breathes out a sigh, before suddenly creating a bounded field around them. Alright, I'm just going to say this. Right now, things aren't doing so well, and if things continue, we might just end up in some massive trouble. Like? First. I don't think the Grail's able to choose non-human masters. The girl says, looking around cautiously, before continuing. 2. You're the second rider in this war. Castor's eyes light up in realization. How had I forgotten? She'd gone with her master yesterday night to view the battle, and one of them was clearly a rider. How had she forgotten so quickly? And then, something in her mind shatters, and she loses her balance. It's only barely that she manages to regain her ground before falling. That's right. There'd been another rider yesterday night. The girl nods and turns back to Ryder. And third, well, it doesn't matter whether you want to join or not, but whatever you do, if things get out of hand, the entire world may just be swallowed by tainted mud, and, you know, begin to end of the world. Shit. So the Grail's trying to fight back, huh? Ryder says, her blue eyes now much clearer than before. It seems she's broken out of it too, but this brings up a worrying revelation. The Grail is now actively sabotaging its own ritual, placing small, yet far-reaching doors in their mind to stop them from realizing the strangeness of this war. Why is it doing so? What does the girl mean by the world being swallowed by mud? And why does she know so much? Yep. The girl says, playfully popping the end of her word, though her eyes are hardly playful. Sir Francis Drake. May I seek your assistance to end the Grail once and for all? There are no lies in her words, no hidden intentions behind her back. Everything she says is the truth, and once again, Castor is reminded of her past, of a pair of humans who'd lived and reached the impossible, who'd accomplished deeds not even she could ever imagine. The world falls silent, and despite the bottom half of her body gone, Ryder hums in thought, rubbing her chin as she considers. Then, she shrugs and smirks. I've never liked short voyages, so I'll take up that offer, Master. I'm glad you agree. Then, with the connection established, Ryder's disappearing body immediately reforms. Whoa, you sure aren't kidding, Castor. This girl's loaded. And despite that, the girl doesn't look the slightest bit winded, and that's perhaps the most shocking of all. Well, nice you have you aboard, Francis. Oh, and call me Hanami. I still can't get used to Lancer calling me master and all. Ryder no, Francis laughs, giving a hard friendly pat at her new master's back. Not one for formalities, are you, Hanami? Hanami then turns to Castor. Oh, and Castor. Yes? Hanami smiles. Take care of Waver, alright? I don't want anyone in this war to die, especially him. Castor blinks, surprised, but she nods and returns the smile. I will, Hanami. Alright then, I guess I'll go back now. See you later, Castor. See ya, Castor. And so, the bounded field disappears, and Castor is alone, standing on a small patch of burnt grass. She takes a moment to sigh, internally reprimanding herself for being caught in such a trap. Had Hanami not appeared before them like that, would she have been able to shatter the illusion herself? Would she be too late when it happened? It's ironic really. For someone who is quite adept at illusions, she was caught by one so easily. Castor. She then hears Waver's voice calling out to her, and she turns around to meet him, smiling slightly. Oh well. How the hell did I get into this situation? Ma, it'll be fine, Shiro-kun. I agree too. Shiro smiles, but he heaves a tired sigh on the inside. It had only been a couple hours since Hanami told him to be careful and went out, and he'd already gotten tangled up with the war. Not only that, he'd also revealed his status as a magus, and a strong one at that when he managed to go toe-to-toe with a red-haired lancer. And now, forced by Ryder's exuberant personality, he's walking around Fuyuki with the other two, conversing with the master and servant pair, though it's more of them speaking and him listening and nodding. But the recent battle is still weighing on his mind. Because, isn't Lancer Gareth? The Holy Grail only summons one of each class, right? Then was that man lying? He doesn't seem to be, and he doubts a man with such skill on wielding his spear can be anything but a Lancer. He wanted to bring the issue up, but he can already hear Hanami screaming him for being careless, so he withdrew his voice. By the way, how did you get so strong, senpai? Akemi, Ryder's master, asks, looking to him with no small interest. Ryder seems to be listening as well, though her interest is a bit more hidden. Shiro ponders his answer for a moment, before he decides to give an abridged version of his tale. Well, it's a bit too long to tell you now, but it all started when a girl showed up in front of my house. She asked me to help awaken her magic circuits, and so I did. He gives a quick glance at her, just to see her reaction. As expected of someone who'd recently dropped into the moonlit world, she doesn't seem to understand what he meant, but nods anyways. Things picked up from there. In exchange for unlocking her prana, she gave me lessons on how to use structural analysis and reinforcement effectively. Oh, and we hunted some ghouls along the way as well. Ghouls? Akemi mutters. You mean, like zombies? Basically. And then, all hell broke loose from there. Senpai. You don't need to tell if you don't want to. He smiles at her, shaking his head and continuing. Sorry. The city I lived in was attacked by a malicious being, burning away everything. We tried our best to stop it, to save those who were still alive, but... He goes silent for a moment, and looks up to the bright sky above. We couldn't do anything. Our home was burnt beyond recognition, so, we moved here. Ah. Akemi looks away, her eyes ashamed, and Shiro can already see the apology dancing on her lips, but he swiftly adds. Don't be sorry about it, Akemi-san. What's done is done, so it's all we can do. It's all we can do at this point. Hanami says, her eyes staring right into his. You're afraid. I'm afraid as well. But we can't let it drown us. We're stronger than that. Then she smiles. After all, we've survived the Grail before, why can't we do it again? Why can't we go beyond that? Why can't we destroy it for good this time? Don't let yourself be dragged down by those things. So. What do you say, Shiro? Ready to go? Shiro smiles, feeling the weight on his heart lessen, and he remembers why he is still alive today. Hanami is still here, and that's all that matters. Yeah. You've gone through a lot, haven't you, Shiro? He hears Ryder say, his voice soft and laced with wistful nostalgia. He smiles at him, giving a small nod at the cross-dressing Ryder. Hey, senpai, do you think I'll be able to live? Akemi suddenly says, and both their attention immediately jumps to the girl, whose usually confident eyes are now subdued, afraid. I mean, I have Ryder, but, what about the other masters? I'm just a normal girl, I can't do all this fancy magic you're all doing. Then why don't you have Shiro teach you? Ah, that voice. Slowly, Shiro turns around to meet Hanami, staring at him with a small displeased frown. Gareth is by her side as usual, wearing casual clothing instead of her usual garbs. However, there is also a pink-haired woman on her other side, wearing what seems to be a mix of a coat and a pirate's outfit. Akemi looks between him and the new arrivals, before she suddenly realizes that Hanami is standing with two servants by her side and takes an immediate step back. Hanami's frown changes to an amused smile as she looks at her, before turning back to him, her previous frown back in place. I'm pretty sure I didn't tell you to go out today. He gives a small nod. I also don't remember allowing you to engage another servant in battle. How did she dash? No, of course she knew. Seeing his silence, Hanami sighs, before giving a small smile at the girl. Sorry. My name is Hanami, Shiro's partner. Akemi blinks for a moment, before quickly introducing herself. I'm Kurosawa Akemi. Nice to meet you, Akemi-chan. The introductions continued, and Akemi and Ryder were surprised to hear that Hanami was the master of two servants. Shiro's obviously shocked as well, but he'd already written it off as Hanami's little brand of weirdness. Then, just as the time hit noon, Akemi's stomach rumbled, and with a red-faced Akemi and another amused smile from both he and Hanami, they continued their discussion in a small diner. And it was then that he realized this war might be much harder than they initially expected. Alright, so you guys met with Lancer, and Ryder traded blows with him before Shiro helped, right? Akemi nods, and Hanami's expression grows grim. Here's the thing, I'm the master of Lancer, and she's right here. Just like that, the entire table falls silent. Akemi is looking back to Ryder, confused at the conflicting information she just heard. But the indication is clear to Shiro. It's just like the situation back in the Fifth War, with the Grail sending out altered versions of the servants to fight them. Just, instead of altered versions, it was a new batch of servants this time, and he wasn't sure which one was worse. Also, he notices the slight brightening of Ryder's eyes, along with the subtle change in her prana. Hanami seems to have noticed as well, and continues with her explanation. Not only that, but Hanami swiftly points to Francis, who is enjoying a nice extra-large serving of pasta. Is a Ryder. I'm guessing you know why. Ryder asks, looking much more serious than he'd ever seen. And frankly, the expression didn't really suit him. Hanami nods. Yep. The taint inside the Grail is trying to mess up the war by summoning more servants. So far, I've met a second Berserker and a second Rider, and you've met a second Lancer. So, it's safe to assume that the Grail summons 7 more servants of each class. Silence reigns upon the table again, this time with everyone deep in their own thoughts, excluding Francis who's too busy enjoying her plate of pasta. Then, Hanami suddenly claps. Okay. Enough of this. I want to hear your story. So, how's this war been for you? It doesn't feel like a war, at all. Akemi says uncertainly. Hanami grins. It doesn't, right? I mean, we're supposed to be enemies, but here we are, sitting in a diner and eating lunch. From what I heard, Castor's master is busy learning his magecraft, and Archer and her master are basically relaxing. We're basically doing the exact opposite of what we're supposed to do. Maybe that's why they sent 7 more servants. Shiro says jokingly, but Hanami seems to have caught his idea and gives him a subtle nod. Not a bad theory. He can almost hear her say. But, with the previous tense moment past, the time at the diner continues on, with them all chatting with one another. Silently, Shiro rests his head against the comfy chair the diner has, and he let his mind wander. Mumyu Sandenzuki. 3 strikes were shot forward in an instant. A spark lit, flying into the air, and the spear that had nearly reached Ryder's chest was hit back. He saw Ryder's eyes widen, shocked, but he quickly ignored it and kicked the spearman in the chest, sending him sliding back across the pavement of the emptied harbor. The silence echoed between them. The red-haired spearman looked to him, clearly surprised a human was able to match the speed of his spear, but the shock was quickly rewritten by an excited grin. Shiro looked at the cross-dressing Ryder behind him, and his master standing further away. Deeming them fairly unharmed, he turned back to the Lancer, affirming his grip over the Kojiki Kaimitsu, letting the sword's history and legend assimilate into him. All the voices in his head faded away, and Okita's spirit merged with his. The man took a step forward, and so did he. You blocked my spear. He said, grinning, and he nodded. His grin grew wider. Servant Lancer. I challenge your sword against my spear. Lancer. The words didn't make sense to him. Wasn't Gareth Lancer? Why were there two Lancers? He could feel a pit forming in his stomach, a small realization over this war, but he ignored the feeling. I accept. Let's go. Lancer sped forward. Befitting of a Lancer, the distance between them was crossed in seconds. His spear raced forward, and Shiro held his sword up, deflecting the incoming spear with the side of his blade. Lancer stopped, and suddenly pulled back, hitting his katana and pulling him forward. Barely, Shiro caught Lancer's fist reaching for his chin, and his gained instincts kicked in. He twisted his body, avoiding the attack and smashed his spear down into the pavement. Shiro quickly turned to stab his sword forward, but so did Lancer's fist, quickly racing for his exposed stomach. He narrowed his eyes and stabbed his sword down into the ground. He pivoted over and around the fist, and with a fully reinforced leg, he smashed the limb down onto the back of Lancer's skull. The two jumped back, staring at one another. What an interesting style. I didn't expect you to use Baji Quan either. He said back. Lancer grinned at his quip. Then we're both strange, aren't we? Shiro couldn't quite hold back the small smile on his lips. I agree. And they clashed again, spear against sword, fists against fists. It was Shiro's first time truly battling a master spearman, and he found himself occasionally stumbling over the increased range the weapon gave, but he made do with Sasaki's experience and his own speed. Common sense deems that a magus could never match a heroic spirit. But then again, common sense never applied to him anyway. TCH, sorry about this, my master's asking me to cut this short. Lancer suddenly said, irritation clear to hear. Shiro gave a small nod, and Lancer smirked, before leaping back to make some distance. He tightened his grip on his spear, pointing the weapon forwards, and he closed his eyes. There shall be no second strike. The air seemed to twist around the spearman, swirling around the spear. Lancer tensed his legs, bending his body forward, ready to leap forward. He recognized that stance, recalled the technique from the history the spear bled into him in their clashes. A technique, trained and mastered to perfection, executed with no faults. 3 steps, a sword absolute. The word slipped before he noticed. He bent his knees, building energy within his knees. He reared his hand back behind his head, aiming the tip of his katana forward. Then, they leaped forward. Both were mere techniques, attacks trained and mastered, but their powers and beauty so encompassing that reality bent to their needs. God's Spear. Mumyu Sandanzuki. A single perfected strike met 3 in harmony. The 2 noble phantasms clashed against one another, and whirlwinds were sent out upon their impact. But none overpowered the other, and both combatants were instead sent flying back. Shiro looked to the man in awe and respect, while Lancer looked to him in shock. Shiro's instantaneous strikes failed, and Lancer's perfected spear was countered. What's your name, boy? Amiya Shiro. He answered without hesitation. Lancer looked to him, before he smiled. I will remember that name. Let us fight again. And with that, the man disappeared. So, Shiro stood there, staring at the ground where Lancer was, before he sighed and turned around, only to see Ryder eagerly looking at him, his face too close for his comfort. Oh dear. He thought. Wakey, wakey. Mmh. Slowly, Shiro pulls his eyes open, pushing away the ringing buzz in his head. Above him is a familiar blue ceiling, dotted Y. I fell asleep. He asks. Hanami nods from across the table, looking as energetic as ever. Yep. For a good 3 hours too. Shiro blinks, and then blinks again. 3 hours? He slept 3 hours, at noon, on a sofa chair in a diner. That's strange. Sleep doesn't come so easily to him. Don't worry about it. It's still the afternoon, so no harm is done. Her words don't quite comfort his worries, but he pushed the thought back for later examination. Well, sorry for wasting so much time. Shiro says, awkwardly rubbing the back of his neck. Hanami shakes her head, smiling. It's fine. Francis is out looking around the city with Gareth, so, it's nice and silent. Calm. She says, cradling the glass of orange juice in her hands. Hey, Shiro, when this is all over, wanna go buy a house? Sorry. When this is over, wanna buy a house? She repeats, and Shiro stares. Why? Oh, you know, it's, well. She looks down for a moment, thinking of her answer, before looking back at him again. I kinda miss those days, you know. When it was just us training, with me teaching you and you cooking me food in return. Hanami then smiles. And you haven't made the flan I asked for a long time ago. That I haven't. He smiles wryly, remembering the half-finished product he was about to continue on before he was sucked into Thay False Fuyuki. The smile then turns to a grimace as he pictures that half-finished pudding swimming in the tainted mud, its uncolored white turning black because of all of that mud. Yikes. But buying a house. Granted, there is still a messed up Grail war they need to finish first before they can go to that scenario, but buying a house? Nah, Shiro. What do you want to do after this? Suddenly, Hanami says so, and all the noise around them vanishes. Idly, Shiro notices the empty ID they are in, but he simply turns to her. What do you mean? What do you want to do after all of this? She asks again. After this war is over, after the Grail is dead, what do you want to do? Naturally, Shiro readies his response. Well, that depends. Where do you plan on going? He would have said, but Hanami suddenly continues. No, Shiro. What do you want to do? Did you dash? Read your mind? No, you're just really obvious. She says with a smile. Am I that easy to read? He wonders, and immediately, all three voices in his head sound. Yes. They chorus together, and he can't help but smile wryly to himself. That easy, huh? Shiro goes silent for a moment, pondering for an answer, going round and round in his head. But no matter what he tries, he'd always go back to one singular answer, to the single purpose he still had. To be with you. He finally answers. And Hanami just stares. Dumbfounded, shocked, before she smiles sadly. No, Shiro, I dash. You're all that I have. He continues, remembering the visions of that burning landscape, of a world drenched in that accursed mud, and a knot forms in his gut, twisting and coiling. The faces of those that drowned in that flash by in his mind, and everything suddenly feels suffocating. So why shouldn't I follow you? Hanami stares again. But this time is different. The emotions she holds behind those green eyes of hers are different. They were shaking, horrified, and her body is frigid and unmoving. Why is she looking at him like that? Shiro. He hears Hanami's voice by his side, and he turns to her, seeing her suddenly sitting beside him. When did she dash, he wonders, but then he feels her hand wrap around him, comfortingly. She says nothing, so he doesn't as well, and he returns her hug. Amiya Shiro is broken. He knows that. She knows that. But... Nah, Shiro, let's go buy a house after all this ends, okay? Even then, that doesn't matter. And of course. Hey, she's a taker boy. Go get her. Shut up, Yormer. It's been several more hours since that incident, and the sky was now a deep black, the sun no longer shining its light down onto the earth. And I, Tsunaka Hanami, sitting atop the hotel, am absolutely embarrassed. I mean, gah. I didn't expect T to just hug him out of nowhere. Thankfully, I had to decency to put us in an empty ID, before that, but I'll probably be charged with PDA if anyone else saw that. But I couldn't help it. You're all that I have, so why shouldn't I follow you? Damn it, Shiro. I know the guy is blunt, but I didn't expect him to just say that out of the blue. And, it didn't help that my mystic eyes could see the horrors hiding behind that expressionless persona, of the terrors he'd seen when he was in his coma. It was only for a fraction of a second, but it felt like an eternity, staring into that burning hellscape, forever tainted by all the sins of humanity. And he survived all that for an entire week. It hurt. It hurt to know that Shiro suffered all that, and I can't do shit to ease it. So, yeah, that's why I hugged him. Still doesn't make it any less embarrassing. But it made me happy to know that he considers me above anything else. It's a Sakura route situation, except I'm the one he's followed. I know that he's still holding that dream of his, that ideal to become a hero of justice, but it's tempered now. I can see the fire that burns in his eyes as I speak of Sakura's treatment, the light that shines when we speak of Kiritsugu and Saber. He's a Miyashiro, but he's my Miyashiro. FUA, that makes me sound really possessive. You sure did, Hanami-chan. Whoa, it's been a while, system. Wayo, you're not surprised. Do you want me to fall off the roof or something? Not that I'll die from something like that, but still. Well, and dangling my legs off this tall building's a nice feeling as well. Makes my legs feel all cold and stuff. True, true, system then goes silent for a moment. You sure you changed, Hanami-chan? Of course I have. I huff, looking out to the glittering cityscape, with the distant lights of cars zooming here and there. I mean, it hasn't even been a year, and I've gone from being a normal businesswoman to a magus with enough power to fight heroic spirits. It'll be kinda crazy if I didn't change from all that, you know? Or go insane. That too. Actually, I'm not sure if I'm still sane at this point. Jumping off a skyscraper doesn't sound scary to me, fighting against beings that can tear a city in half only gets me slightly worried. Then again, all magi are insane, right? Yep. Though the meaning of insanity is kind of out there, right? To be insane is to not conform to what society calls being sane. System goes quiet for a moment. But you're a being over power, a king over the people. What is insane to them might not be for you, and what's sane for you is definitely not for them. Yeah. And she soon adds, softly. Yeah. Right now, the fate of this universe is in your hands. Engra Mainyu is now actively trying to destroy the Holy Grail and drown the world in his mud. You have acquainted, even befriended Gilgamesh. You have gathered both the blessings of the dragons and light. Now, it's time for the final act, so to say. And if I fail? Well, you know the answer. That I do. I sigh and look up to the night sky, and suddenly the darkness looming above me feels just a tad more ominous than it did. I think it's about time. Well, that was sudden. Time for. Suddenly, a small black cube pops into existence, placing itself gently on my lap. It feels famila - oh, I got this back in that fake Fuyuki, didn't I? Mysterious box, a strange black cube. There seems to be a small button on its bottom, most likely to open the box. There is a small note attached to it. May fate never chain you again. Yep. So. What's this for? Just watch, slowly, the cube begins to rise, spinning and gaining speed. Then, as it reaches her chest, it pops, exploding in a burst of black stardust. And from it, came nothing. No, something did come out, but I don't. A new update has been implemented. Gamer Ver has been implemented. All previous stats and items have been transferred over. New changes include class selection. Note, further updates will be implemented if issues are discovered. Oh, so it's an update, Wait, class selection. Name, Tsunaka Hanami. Age, 17. Sex, female, human. Class frowny face opened. Level, 29 EXP, 12.142/300.000. HP, 15.080/15.080, 1.508 HP/hour. MP, 25.263/27.260, 3.059, 5 MP/hour. Stamina, 100%, 52% per hour. Strength, 115, 5, plus 64, 5. Vitality, 52. Dexterity, 110, plus 46. Intelligence, 163, 25, plus 125. Wisdom, 105, 5, plus 41, 5. Luck, 32. Stat points, 25. Money, 532.719.164 yen. Yes. Fuck, I've been waiting for this for so long. I've read the basic layout of it and the buffs each class will give, and holy hell is it broken. Seriously, the caster class will bring my intelligence and wisdom up by 150%. It's crazy. I guess the choice after this is obvious, huh? Of course. I mean, 150%. Not even gonna look at saber or assassin. Well, I use a sword cause, why not? And assassin? Why do I even have that? No, seriously, assassins are masters of death, right? Why the hell do I have that choice anyways? I don't have any particular skills that lean towards that class. No. Well, ready, Hanami-chan. The process is going to be a doozy. I'm ready. A second passes, and I can confidently say, I was not ready. It felt like, well, it didn't feel like anything, yet everything. At the same time, I guess. I don't quite know how to explain it, but eternity, and what comes before and after it flashed by my mind. I saw the beginning and the end, creation and destruction, animation and eternity. And between all that, I saw a golden throne, sitting in an endless void, waiting for the time immemorial. My brain didn't quite fully comprehend it, but I know that at some point in that second-long experience that I somehow traveled into the throne of heroes, and I know I managed to get a glimpse at the thing known as the root. But what it actually looks like, and what truths they hold. Nah man, my head just kinda exploded at that point. Knowledge of the unknown flowed into my head, memories flowing out and back into me, and I catch a glimpse of something sitting in the distance, smiling and waiting. And then it all ended, and a single notification pops up in my eyes. Congratulations! You have selected Caster as your first class. May fate never chain you again, Tsunaka Hanami. Also, that second of unconsciousness was apparently enough to make me lean forward and fall off the roof. I managed to create an empty ID in time, but the suddenness of it all didn't allow me to do much. So I crashed headfirst into a car, made my ears bleed from the horrible noises the car is making, and a terrible ache in my nose. For those who haven't realized it just yet, the fake servants are pulled straight from Fate/Strange Fake. I actually really like the idea of having true and fake servants in the same war. Just that, since Hanami is here, I made the fake servants to be the ones summoned by Ingram Manu to mess the war up and get back at Hanami for ruining everything in the previous arc. Also, for that intimate moment between Shiro and Hanami, you can decide whether that was romantic or just platonic. I myself don't think that Hanami or Shiro currently has any romantic feelings for each other, but that's basically because Shiro's a stubborn and broken teenager with severe survivor's guilt, while Hanami was previously an independent woman working in the real world. They probably have feelings for one another, but whether those feelings will evolve into romantics is currently up in the air. Anyways, here's a description. 1. The Caster class. Caster, the servant of magic, famed for their magical prowess. Their noble phantasms vary greatly, as vast as magic itself. This class specializes in their magic power, though lack any other outstanding attributes. However, they compensate their weakness with their special class skills. Boosts natural intelligence and wisdom by 150%, boosts natural dexterity and luck by 20%, all damage done by magical means is increased by 50%, gives the skill, magic resistance LV 70, and finally, here's Hanami current stats, since some people have been a skin for it. Without equipment, name, Tsunaka Hanami. Age, 17. Sex, female, human. Class Frowny Face Caster. Level, 29 EXP, 12.142/300.000. HP, 15080/15080, 25.13 HP/min. MP, 18860/27260, 99.81 MP/min. Stamina, 100%, 52% per hour. Strength, 115.5, plus 64.5. Vitality, 52. Dexterity, 122.8, plus 46. Intelligence, 262.75, plus 105.25. Wisdom, 206.5, plus 46.5. Luck, 38.4. Stat points, 25. Money, 532, 719, 164 yen. If you like this content, don't forget to like and subscribe. See you later, bye bye.